The word blot that occurs in Colossians 2 about because of Christ's ransom sacrifice, he blotted out or canceled or obliterated the laws that were written contrary to us and took them out of the way. Now, we've already gone through that in previous videos that it's got nothing to do with the Ten Commandments, because the Ten Commandments were not written contrary to man. They were written in a manner to actually put into place obvious things that love would never try to do, which is to hurt their fellow man or violate any of God's rules. So, but it leads to the word erasure, and some people have pronounced it erasure, but I would feel it better to use the word erasure. It's almost like time, like era, time, sure. And when you write down you take a look at the statement of birth document, it's quite interesting because it's got what appears to be an obliteration or an erasure on it, and it means total destruction of something, but we know that God's time hasn't come to bring judgment, so there is a time limit that God has set into place. So right now we're under grace, but only when we accept it. It's a faith in the moment to see the outcome of what God has planned for man. But in the meantime, there's a grace period that man's been under. Now, if we look at before Christ came, it'd be interesting, that's a BC. We even refer to that in timing. In era, we say BC, which is before Christ. When we say AD, it's really like at the time of Christ or from the birth of Christ on. And so therefore, when were we born? Were we born before the event or after the event? What's unique about this statement of birth record, when they put a authentication of the minister's seal and signature on the document, it's a cover document placed on it at the official document services, they actually have an AD on there, which stands out because this Great Seal document, even written by a de facto nation, still has an AD on it as to determine or distinguish the timing of that document. And that stood out to me because it says full faith and credence to be given to the signature and seal of that minister in all places, but it's with an AD time frame on it. Unlike the BC, which doesn't have that at all. The BC just has what appears to be a year, but there's no AD or BC. And so that's very unclear. And therefore, I can understand that the BC may not be the greatest thing to be walking around with to an extent, because it appears to be almost like a fictitious bond for a fictitious debt on something that has already been obliterated by Christ, but of course it requires acceptance. And therefore that sin name would be canceled, or that charge under that surname. So when I was looking up the word erasure in Oxford, in a very, very condensed Oxford, as far as like, it's all 22 volumes, but it's placed in very tiny print in here, so you'll have to bear with me in looking at it. It has, erasure is the action of erasing or obliterating. An instance of erasing or obliterating. Then it says, the place where a word or letter has been erased or obliterated. Total destruction, wiping out. Now, we know God wiped out all the evil at the time of the flood. We know that Christ has really removed sin, but only upon acceptance. Now, is it possible that the reason why it's only underlined, the surname is underlined on the statement of birth, is because someone hasn't chosen yet? And because a child couldn't choose, it appears to be obliterated, but it's not really a complete erasure, because it's not been drawn through the name, it's been drawn underneath the name, or it underlines the name. Though the word underline still leads to words that lead back to the word cancel. Strangely, it leads to a lot of things, even stretch, like stretching the truth on something. So it's not really the truth. And we know to have a fiction, you have to have truth and error. You can't just have error, because the error wouldn't stand out as an error without the truth being there. So your Christian name or your given name is your original name or your real name. The other name is not real. One is real property. The other one is this idea of man's idea of property called personal property. And it's under the persona of a man. So it's or under something that's a fiction of man, something that man has created for value. We know that land is invaluable. There is no price tag you could put on water, trees, and all the things that come with the land. We know that man places that on there, but that is a fiction. So right now we're in a period of time where man has a choice. And so why that document most likely does not have the line drawn right through is because a child would have to eventually mature to make a choice at an age of election. And so the only time someone could fully make a legal choice of which way you're going to go from legal to grace would be to abandon all legal and therefore accept grace. And therefore that can't be, it's there, it appears to be there as the overhead, but until you actually do something to remove that, it's going to remain there. So it's not canceled until you do the full abandonment and the removal of your given name from there. At that point, there would be actually nothing on the record. It would be almost like there's no information on there, because the surname would be obliterated, and the Christian name having been removed, because it certainly wasn't Caesar's property. If it was registered in any manner, it could not be for a registration of tax. It would be for a registration showing an exemption or something that's contrary to the Constitution of man. So therefore there is a jurisdictional error occurring on the document because of the fact that the civil side had no ability to claim the individual God-given property because it wasn't their property to begin with, and therefore there is probably what we consider to be maybe a lack of exercise of judicial authority because it's being asked in a civil position, but it's actually an error to ask for the given name, even though it appears it's required under positive law, which to an extent positive law will do things contrary to God's law. And therefore there was definitely, just as Jesus was executed for crimes that he did not commit, it's the same situation that goes on with what we're talking about regarding this document, because certainly the child could never have committed the crime, but it's implied that he was born in sin or in charge of that name, and eventually would take over the charge or the sin or the debt of that name. But we know only at an age of understanding could someone accept Christ, and therefore we know all the water baptisms and those that accepted Christ did not happen as a baby or as a child, but happened as a mature individual who could make a choice. So we hope that we understand that there could be a very, very strong reason why the birth certificate, which is a bond or a debt bond, or a debenture, is actually not concise with AD or BC on it. Maybe the closest we can get to it is just the fact they call it a BC or a birth certificate, and therefore it would be as if you were born before the event of Christ, not after the event.
He came back.
So anyways, at this point, we hope that's clear on the word erasure, and if we look closely at that, that'll relate to the scripture that deals with the word blot, which was canceling out, and also led to the word pardon, because you were pardoned from the penalty that would have been enacted against anybody who would have committed treason, whether to a government or to God. So therefore, we know right now all the nations that are de facto are actually in a treasonous position with those that are considered to be in the original sovereignty of kings and monarchs that were in control of people before democracy had happened. And then the people were granted democracy or what we consider to be almost like a treasonous availability to go on with their own government based on the will of the people. And therefore it takes the will of the people and the consent of the people to actually to carry something out. You can't have a war without participants, so therefore everybody was participating in it, and therefore they're responsible for the charge and the sin and the penalty that is with that. Only by not being part of that could they be free of that charge, and that only comes through the grace and the acceptance of the gospel message and the grace of Christ. So we hope that you're clear on this. Do a lot of research on the word erasure, blot, cancel. I think you'll get a good feeling for this, and the word pardon out of the law books also can give you an understanding of where the law is coming from on this. And most of the time, the law is just mimicking something that's already been put in place. Though it appears that when we live under the law of a nation, many times it seems to be going contrary to our spiritual beliefs, but it's mainly because of the fact that we're participating, and we shouldn't have been in there to begin with to have those spiritual beliefs violated. So anyways, we'll keep you updated on where we go with this, but the information is very clear, at least out of the Oxford, of what erasure is, and therefore research it, and you'll come to a clearer understanding to make your path straight.